Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever. And today we're actually going to be doing a pretty highly requested video in my review of the Supreme Knight Batman from Mezco. Some people had noticed that the Sovereign Knight Batman figure that I used for the comparison didn't look like the original release version that we all got. Well, that's because I customized it. As you can see, the original release version that we got looked like this. And this is my actual figure that you're seeing before I did anything to it. As you can see, it kind of has just the plain gray. And unfortunately, that almost makes Batman look like he's wearing some kind of long johns or some kind of thermals that you would wear to keep warm, like in the winter. And I think it led to a lot of people not really appreciating that standard release of Sovereign Knight Batman as much as, say, the PX exclusive with the blue. So I was actually inspired by Mezco themselves. Originally, when Mezco shown off this figure, those initial pictures looked like my custom that you're seeing in front of you now. It had black, or a very dark gray at least, in between all of those little tampographic details, those rubber decals that are applied all over the suit to give that texture. So it was important to me to bring it back to that. This same prototype look was even seen at some of the toy fairs later on, where people got a close-up look at that figure, and here's some pictures of that as well. So I wanted to get it as close as I could to that look. You can see that there's kind of a spandex-y kind of bodysuit under here, and there's all these raised, almost metal little details going on, almost as if there was a metal or steel weave going all through the suit. And those original prototype pictures shown it looking like this, where there was a very dark color. So I felt like that this was more of the original intention of the designers. Looking at my original product and seeing what we've turned it into with a little bit of help, which I'm going to teach you about in just a moment, I personally think that this is not only worth it, but I sort of think it's essential for anybody who owns that standard release of Sovereign Knight. So without further ado, let me explain what you're going to need for really this fairly simple custom project. First thing you're going to need is black RIT dye. Now, black RIT dye is extremely easy to obtain, and it's very cheap as well. I think it's only like $3 or $4. Not only can you order it off of Amazon, but you can also find it at Walmart. That puts it in reach for a lot of collectors. I actually had a hard time finding where they had it at Walmart, and finally discovered that at my tiny Walmart, they actually had it with the fabric softeners and with the detergents. It's very important to know which kind of RIT dye we're going to be using for this project. There are two types of RIT dye, so it is important to know which one that you're going to use. Now, technically, you could use either one, but I do have some very specific recommendations for you based on what kind of effect you want. You can see that for me, I wanted it to look like that original prototype, where those rubber little decals, or whatever they are, that are on top of the fabric that gives it that metal look, those have remained that light gray, almost white color, just like that original prototype did. And if you want that same look that I've got, you're going to want to go with the regular black RIT dye, okay? Just the standard kind. If you really do want to dye these parts black as well, if you want an all black Sovereign Knight, then you're going to want to go with the synthetic kind of RIT dye. Here's the difference. Synthetic is more intended to dye things like plastics, and the regular RIT dye is more intended to dye things like fabric. So if you get the synthetic version, then you're going to also dye all of these little bits that you're seeing on it as well, not just the fabric undersuit like I did. However, I will warn you that if you go that route, the synthetic dye, to make it work, takes quite a bit more patience and quite a bit more effort and quite a bit more heat. And so if that's something you're interested in doing, I have not tried that, so I can't say exactly how well it works. I have used synthetic to dye some plastic parts from figures, but I will say you have to keep it very, very hot. And you also have to mix in a little salt with it as well, so it does get a little complicated. The only other thing that you're going to need is a container that you won't mind getting dyed black, because let me tell you, this RIT dye stuff can be pretty strong. So whatever container you use, be comfortable with the possibility of it turning black. For me, I used one of those plastic popcorn tubs that you would get from the movie theater for like a promotional thing, and it was already black anyway, and I probably wouldn't be eating anything else out of it because you never know about the chemicals. The last couple of things you'll need is just maybe a set of tongs so that you can handle the figure as it gets out of the hot water without burning yourself. You'll probably want to wear some safety glasses as well, just in case some of the RIT dye solution bubbles up, so you want to be careful about that. Lastly, you'll probably want some latex gloves. Now, the reason is because if you don't use latex gloves, and I tried not to at first, but I learned my lesson because my hands were dyed a shade of black for a few days. So it kind of looked like I had gray smudges all over my hands. So you'll definitely want to be careful about all of that. Also, it goes without saying, you probably want to do this project in a ventilated area. First things first, you want to bring water to a boil. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and put that in another container, whichever container you're going to use. Then you'll want to mix in your RIT dye. It really doesn't take that much. The more RIT dye you put in it, the darker the final product will be. But I didn't go absolutely nuts or anything with putting a lot of the RIT dye in it. You want to put in a little bit of dishwashing liquid. This kind of helps it permeate the fabric a little bit, and it just makes it a little more effective. Once you have your mix going and it's all settled, you'll want to prepare your Batman figure for the process. So there's a couple of things you'll want to do. Very first thing you'll want to do is, of course, just pop off the head. Next, you'll want to take some clean water and you'll want to get that to a boil or very hot at least. And you can actually remove this part, just get it a little hot, and it comes right out just like the head. And I've actually got it back in there, so I'm not going to pop it back out. But with a little bit of heat, it comes right out. And then you can also remove the cape while you're doing this. Now, here's the thing. You can also use a blow dryer for this. I'm not really fond of blow dryers because of some really unfortunate experiences I've had trying to use them to heat up some things. I've accidentally melted plastic before with them, so I kind of like going with the water. You can also remove the Bat logo for this as well, but I want to caution you here. There's really not necessarily a reason to remove the Bat logo. If it was to get dyed black, you probably couldn't tell any difference. So sometimes getting this logo out can be a little difficult because part of it's glued in and part of it's not. I can still wiggle mine out a little bit right now. Actually, you can see it just comes out right there. But sometimes you can actually damage it getting it out. So you'll want to be careful about that. Like I said, not really necessary to get that out. The same thing can happen with the gauntlets right here. Of course, you'll pop the hand out and then these gauntlets just come off very easily. Just a little bit of heat is all it takes. Next thing you'll want to do is definitely remove this belt. You don't want that belt to get dyed black unless you do, but I will say that the regular RIT dye usually won't dye plastics too quickly, but this belt comes apart right here. You can see that because I've unclamped mine once, it's now very easy to take it apart. And you can see that it's just got a little peg right there. And there's just a hole that it plugs into. Now notice that there's a lot of glue residue on mine. That's because it is glued in. So you will have to heat this up to get this to work. But then it should just pull right apart and you'll have no trouble getting it back on. I'm actually not re-gluing mine because I like the option of removing the belt. Same thing with the boots. Of course, with a little bit of heat, these will pop right out. Once Batman is ready, he'll be looking pretty funny because he'll just be kind of a body without any appendages, and you'll be ready to put him in the solution. Now, like I said earlier, you'll want to use that pair of tongs to just dip him in. Now, once he's in, you'll want to just leave him. That water should be very, very hot. Remember, this process really doesn't work that well unless the water is very, very hot. Keep in mind that as you take him out to check on him, and I would check on the figure probably every 4 or 5 minutes, just to kind of see what's happening with the color. You'll notice right away that if you're just using the regular black RIT dye, that there isn't anything happening to the raised tamper-graphic details. And so you don't have to worry about those getting dyed if you're just using the regular kind. But you will notice that this is starting to darken. I will say that the figure being wet will make you think it's even darker than it actually is. What I did a couple of times after having it in there for probably 15 minutes or so, I eventually took it out and I actually took a blow dryer on just a low heat setting, and I kind of dried it out a little more quickly that way so that I could see what I was working with. Just remember that you can always get the figure darker. Even now, if I wanted to, I could go pop it in right now, a year after I've done it the first time, and we could actually darken that down just a little bit with more RIT dye. However, You really can't lighten this up once you get it dark, so be careful. Here's the great thing about this particular project. It really doesn't matter if you get it dark, because nothing's really gonna happen with these rubber overlay pieces, and the darker, probably the better with the undersuit. But I had it in there for probably about 20 minutes or so. I finally took it out and was fairly satisfied with it. You will wanna reheat the gauntlet pieces, and just so that they'll go on a little more easily. You'll want to reheat this bottom cowl piece at the top so that it plugs in more easily. Remember to put your cape in, of course. You want to get the belt back on there, and it should just plug right back in very easily. And of course, you'll want to heat up these boots because they're probably the hardest thing to get out. So you can actually just use your blow dryer and just give it a little bit of heat, and these should plug right back in securely. So that shouldn't be a problem. You should have something very similar to this. And if you're like me, it broke my heart when I saw that they had actually changed the prototype. I don't know if I was necessarily in the minority or not, but I actually loved how that original prototype looked, where it had the black and the kind of lighter armor pieces on top of it. And I felt like their changes that they made in actual production made the figure look more generic, made Batman look more like he was wearing pajamas, whereas this looks like actual armor, almost like the patterns you saw in the Dark Knight movies. So in the end, I have to say that I really strongly suggest this mod. I think it's simple. I think just about anybody can do it. And the best part is after you let this guy dry for a little while, and you know, that's with a blow dryer or not. For me, it took probably a solid day for it to dry completely without using a blow dryer. It's permanent. This isn't something that's gonna wipe onto your fingers or anything. You know, I don't have any residue coming off or anything like that. It's not the kind of thing where you'll have to be careful with it, or it's going to limit anything about the articulation or change the figure in some way. There's absolutely nothing that changes about the usability of this figure. And it's not one of those customs where you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to pose it or touch it now. No, it actually, to me, it made it more fun because it looks so much better like this, just in my opinion, just in my view. And I think that it's just tremendous once you add that kind of color. And the great part about this is look at all of the detail work that you can see now. You can see all of those separations, even going into the underarm and on the side of the figure. All those separations, all those patterns, even on the back, is just completely obvious now. And it almost looks as if someone has had to go in and do all of this intricate detail work to get all these lines straight, when in reality, you just had to dip this in a mixture for about 20 minutes and check on it every now and then. To me, this is about as simple a custom as you could possibly do, and it makes such a big difference. Anyway, guys, I hope that this video has been helpful for you. Hopefully it inspires you to maybe have a second look at that standard Sovereign Knight Batman figure. It's already a terrific figure, but just getting it to be restored to that first level that Mezco had it at is just so eye-opening, and it really gives the figure a breath of new life. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please make a comment down below. I actually did something sort of similar with my Netflix Daredevil figure. So if you would like to see a video about that, please let me know down below. I'd be very happy to show you how to finally get that pesky off red to actually match the color of the gloves and the mask. You guys take care, be safe out there, God bless, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Take care.